Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and welcome to the third episode of the WAM Show. Today we've got some incredible guests lined up. We've got Jeff Berwick, the one and only dollar vigilante. He's basically one of the most famous anarchists in the world, and I'd like to make the point that he's an anarcho-capitalist, not an anarcho-communist. I gotta make that clear because there might be some confusion, and we don't want that kind of confusion because there's a huge difference. It's the difference between collectivism and individualism. Now, we also have Debbie Bacigalupi on the show, who had run for Congress previously in California. She's an authority on Agenda 21 and on property rights, and we're very much looking forward to speaking with her. Now, I wanted to get to some news because there's some really crazy stuff going on in the world right now, like that's any different from any previous time. I know it's been pretty nuts lately. Now, Congressman Bart Korman, a Missouri lawmaker, introduced a bill recently that requires lobbyists to report sexual relations with state legislators as a gift in their disclosure to the state's ethics commission. The congressman said, "I hope it deters any of that activity, but if that activity does occur, it's at least transparent." Now, I get what he's trying to do here. We obviously want things to be more transparent, but who on earth, as a congressman or a lobbyist, is going to go to the government, fill out consent forms and say, look, I had sex with a politician or I had sex with a lobbyist? That's so absurd that, they think that people are actually going to follow along with that. I understand the point, but again, it's government thinking that paperwork and, pieces of paper and legislation are going to change the way things are. I'm pretty sure congressmen aren't going to openly admit that they're taking bribes from lobbyists, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to openly admit that they're having sex with the lobbyists because one plays into the other, and I think that's quite clear. That's the point of being a lobbyist, and that's the point of being a politician, especially in today's climate. You're not going to stop corruption by, putting in consent forms. It just reminds me of South Park in a way, where, they had all these SJW PC guys all signing consent forms for sex. It's just stupid. I just have to lay it out there that this is a joke of a story, and I know that there were good intentions intertwined with it, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work, Congressman Korman. Not going to happen. I also wanted to talk about, now Obama seemed to have something in his eye this week as he pushed an illegal executive order through using people's emotions. Yes, he fake cried again. The body language experts agree that the crying was not legitimate, and it appears Obama, the puppet, rubbed something in his one of his eyes that made him tear up beforehand. I just find it very interesting that this guy keeps fake crying. It's actually infuriating. It makes me just hate him so much because, of course, we know he's a puppet, but sometimes puppets can be just it's something that makes you want to just puke. The things that some of these guys do say. Obama fake cries, during Sandy Hook after drone bombing a wedding with a bunch of children at it. He didn't care about them. He's fake crying about this whole gun control thing as he arms Mexican drug cartels, arms ISIS, arms Al-Qaeda, and he drone bombs children in the Middle East. Hundreds of thousands have died. It's just so disgusting that, the double standards that are involved here. People will say, oh, well, those people are over there. We have people over here that are dying. Yeah, we have people everywhere that are dying. Let's stop killing people. Hello? It's pretty freaking simple. I have to censor myself there a bit. I just wanted to also mention that, he also assassinates American citizens without trial, as he did a 16-year-old Colorado student, son of Anwar al-Awlaki, quite a few years ago. That's a National Defense Authorization Act. Check that out. We have something similar in Canada called Bill C-51. Obama is a tyrant. This has nothing to do with racism. This is just total disgust at a man who is signing documents, as he's told to do, that end the lives of thousands of people. George Bush was a terrible man as a puppet. Obama is a terrible man as a puppet. Let's stop this left-right paradigm BS because it's getting on my nerves because people are losing their lives because of this stupid paradigm. Let's get with it, people. Now, What on earth is happening in China? There is clearly a financial crisis, and for that I'd like to introduce someone who's going to be sitting with me today on the show. We have John Sigurdson with us, and he of course published the book The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us, with a foreword from our previous guest, G. Edward Griffin. He's a Freedom Force International member, and he's also owner and operator at The Economic Truth. He does a lot of work with us at WAM, so I'd like to welcome John to the show.
Thank you.
Now, John, what is happening in China? Like, this is crazy. It's enough to say, the fiat dollars are failing, but right now it just seems like we're at the very end of the ropes. It's not going to last much longer. What's happening?
Well, first of all, what has been going on in China is that they've been pushing in a whole bunch of new debt into the system. The central bank has been doing quantitative easing, which is basically taking government debt and monetizing it. Like, they're pushing a whole bunch of paper into the system, but into certain, they're not pushing it into where people see it. They push it into the stock market or into real estate. You got to remember, China is a centrally planned communist economy. I am so fed up with hearing this bullshit that they're capitalists over in China. It's so far away from being it. What's happening right now with the whole stock market crashes in China is it's been margin debt. Margin debt is basically if you have a home equity line of credit on your house where you can take up more money and borrow it against your house, the more house increase in value. Well, same with your stock portfolio. The more your stock portfolio increases in value, the more equity you can take out of your portfolio and buy new stocks. So you keep pushing up the markets until a certain point where people want to get some of their profits back. That's when you get what's called people want to call their margins, and they start selling their portfolios.
Yeah.
That's where we had the plummets. The first day after New Year's when they started trading, just plummeted about 8%. Then they pushed in 130 billion yuan at the central bank into the stock market to try to keep it up. It just inched up, I think about 1% on different exchanges they have, and then it plummeted right down again the day after. And they stopped it after 17 minutes. They stopped trading, and they shut down trading because what they're afraid of, if this continues, they'll just create a whole stock market crash, and you'll have the new crash, and it would just spread all over the world. So that's what they're afraid of. Also, China is known for state-owned enterprises where they've been given benefits to their big corporations and lending them cheap money, and then also buying from them when there's no demand for their supply. So they've been building ghost cities in China with the real estate and so on. And now it's all coming down because there's no demand for their supply that they created. I look at copper. Copper is down under $2 per pound right now. It's historically low, and what it shows that commodities going down is that the global economy is not working anymore. There's no trade. People are not building a lot of things anymore. And China is at the forefront of this because they really want to have control and be the next move from the west to the east and have the control. They want to get the control that they had back in year 1024 when they created the first paper currency in the world, where they had an economic boom. They had a great miracle of debt and so on. And then it plummeted down, and the whole empire, the Sung Empire, which was the first one that created this paper currency, evaporated itself. Why can't they learn? They had 4 different empires after each other after that, destroying their currency, and they're doing the same exact mistake again. I guess 800 years you forget stuff.
Well, Genghis Khan and Chairman Mao are just loving this right now. Do we let it collapse and just let people rebuild it, or what should be done, and what advice would this give us in Canada, if any, considering the fact that we're all going down the same road?
Well, historically said it's meant to it has to fail. They will try to do maybe a devaluation of the currency or so on, where they actually just say, well, now you're gonna have this new yuan or this new Canadian dollar, and then you're going to take less of that new Canadian dollar, which is going to have a substantially more lower value of what you had before in your bank account. This happened to a friend of mine in Argentina in 2001, where he lost about 75% of his money that he thought he had by they devaluing the currency. That's what we're going to see. We're going to see bail-ins coming. We're going to talk about this in a later little segment about bail-ins. What I say to people, there's like certain ways that experts tells you to like protect yourself. I would say like there's like the old monetary metals, like gold and silver. There's commodities, especially like people needs commodities, especially the most important one is food and water. I say like keep water around, keep food around, because we don't want to be dependent on the government when the system crashes. It's dangerous to be dependent on the government. Then we're going to end up in those happy places like the FEMA camps that they're creating in the United States.
Yeah, and we've seen that with Hitler's Germany after the Weimar Republic failed. And, this is where I kind of just say, like, come on, people. You gotta get to your windows, look outside, and say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not gonna take it anymore. And seriously, it's about time, because we are going down that road. We do not want to be debt slaves. If we're debt slaves, we'll also become slaves in every other way of possible in life. Now, thank you, John. We'll be joined by John in the next segment, and with Jeff Berwick, and followed by Debbie Bacigalupi. So please stay tuned, and we'll see you soon. All right, everybody, we are here with Jeff Berwick, the Dollar Vigilante, and of course, there's so much to talk to him about. I mean, this guy, if you look him up, look up the Dollar Vigilante, look up Anarchast. He's done incredible work for more than a decade, and he basically lays out exactly what's happening in the world today with the monetary system, and he's also a very famous anarchist, and that's where he and I definitely have a lot in common. So welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Josh. Good to talk to you.
Well, we're also joined by John Sneisen, who wrote the book, The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us, and he'll be joining us today. So, Jeff, what are your economic predictions for 2016? Because right now I'm looking at a lot of kind of scary news about the Chinese stock markets, and a lot of people are wondering what exactly is going to happen, because I know yourself and many others like Martin Armstrong and just very well-read economists have made predictions for the collapse happened in 2015. What happened, and what's going on in China right now?
Well, to actually go through the entire reasoning behind it would take hours and hours, and that's what I've been writing about at the Dollar Vigilante now for over 5 years. It goes back to 1913 with the founding of the Federal Reserve, which was essentially a corporate takeover, a coup, a financial takeover of the United States, passed on Christmas Eve in 1913, while most people were away. And the president at the time later said that it was his biggest regret, having turned over control of the country to the banksters. Then, of course, we had the Great Depression in 1929, and that was all set up by the Federal Reserve. They greatly increased the money supply and then greatly decreased it, causing a massive crash, which was the Great Depression. And then they bought up everything at pennies on the dollar. In 1933, they decided that they were going to confiscate gold from Americans in the land of the free. And so Americans weren't even allowed to hold gold from 1933 to 1973. And during that time in 1971, on August 15th, Richard Nixon took the final vestiges of the gold backing away from the dollar. He took it away because he said it was because of currency speculators and it was a temporary measure. And just like everything else, he said it was a lie, and every president says is a lie. And since then, it's been interesting. We've been on a completely fiat system since 1971, since essentially every currency in the world, except for the Swiss franc, which held on a little longer, was essentially using the U.S. dollar as its backing, because the U.S. dollar prior to 1971 was backed by gold. So we've also entered into a period with nation states which are all democracies and very highly socialist as well as fascist at the same time, which has generated a ton of debt, an absolute tidal wave of debt. And I was watching it all. I actually went through the tech bubble in 2001. and started to realize what was going on in the financial and monetary system at that time, and did a lot of reading. And I spent about 5 years just reading everything I could on it. And then I was expecting the 2008 crisis to happen. And once that happened, I knew that it was time for me to start to get out there and tell people what's going on. I knew we were in the final stages of the system now. And I said back then, and I started the Dollar Vigilante in 2010, and I said that we had 5 to 10 years before this whole system comes crashing down. And we just finished 5 years just last year, obviously, 2015. And I was looking at the cycle theories and seeing what was going on. I was expecting things to get really bad quite soon. And we came upon a number of different information, some of it related to something called the Shemitah. And I said that we will see the beginning of the collapse begin in September of 2015. It actually came a few weeks earlier with global stock markets crashing around the world in late August. And it rebounded somewhat in October, November. And now I'm expecting 2016 to be an outright bloodbath. Economically, it's just looking absolutely horrendous out there. The numbers are unbelievable. If you look at all the numbers, they're very reminiscent of 2007. Oil has come down dramatically. In 2007, it had come down from over $100 to around $30, same as it is today. The junk debt is the amount high yield debt. So these are bonds that are a little bit more risky. They're starting to collapse just like they did in 2007. The big difference, the only difference really between 2008 and today is in 2008, the system nearly collapsed. And even George Soros, who I don't like at all, but he said that the system collapsed in 2008. And really all they did after that was print money to keep it alive. And that's what they've been doing. That's what quantitative easing 1, 2, and 3 and was all about. Central banks around the world are printing money. They're actually now going into negative interest rates because the governments of the world are so in debt that if interest rates rose, they'd all be bankrupt very quickly. So we're nearing the end days of this system. And I'm expecting 2016, no matter what, to be roller coaster ride, and definitely expecting it to be something that most people don't expect, a real crisis situation. And if we get through 2016, it's not going to last much longer. We could see it sort of stay together a couple more years possibly, but this system is really in the end stages of collapse.
Absolutely. And of course, you became wealthy at quite a young age, and as a founder of StockHouse, you survived the tech bubble. What is your advice to those that, it seems a bit too late at this point, but what is your advice to those that, might get caught in the middle of this economic collapse? What should they do to survive it?
Well, you say I survived the tech bubble. It's barely survived. The company that I founded in 1994 became the largest financial website in Canada, StockHouse.com. It still is to this day. I sold in 2002 after we almost went bankrupt after the tech bubble collapsed. So that's what really taught me, or actually I started looking into what was going on because it made no sense to me. I was like, how do I have this company that starts in my house, 2 or 3 or 4 years later, it's worth $240 million and it's all over the world. And then a few months after that, it's worthless and we're bankrupt. This doesn't make any sense to me. So the first book I read after that was The Creatures from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, which describes how the Federal Reserve came into existence. So that was the beginning of a long rabbit hole that I started going down to understand what the system is. And the system is set up to impoverish the majority of people and to greatly enrich the very top, the very financial elite. This is sort of what the 1%, sort of the 99% sort of thing is talking about. But they don't actually understand what's causing it. They think it's capitalism, which is insane. Capitalism is just people transacting and voluntary transactions between people trading, and that's what makes the world go around, essentially. Without that, we'd have nothing. So a lot of the sort of people think, and they rightly realize and they rightly see that the majority of people are being impoverished and the very small amount of people are becoming incredibly wealthy. And that's what we have today. But it's mostly caused by central banks and their inflationary policies. Ford, the creator of the automaker in the early 1900s, said that if people understood the monetary system and how it works, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. And I still think that's actually the case, but it's been over 100 years and most people still don't understand how it works. And they make sure of that. They put them in government indoctrination camps called public schools and never teach them about how the money system works. It's a big scam, essentially. It's heinous, and it's about to collapse, in my opinion.
Well, it's amazing because capitalism doesn't exist in current day society. It can't with the level of coercion, with the level of government monopolization that exists. And I wanted to point out that in advertising this show today, I've run into a lot of crazy people that are, against you. A lot of it's unbelievable the crap that comes out of these, anarcho-communists that you find online. And, I just have to say, like, it's pretty amazing that you continue to do what you do and while dealing with all these defectors, because I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. They called me a rapist for saying the word rape. I mean, like, these people are nuts, man.
Oh, they're beyond nuts. I actually didn't, I've never really got into a conversation with any of them. I did by accident last week. Someone posted something about, we're having an anarcho-capitalist conference in Acapulco, and someone went on Facebook and messaged in Acapulco and said something like, I hope you guys get killed by the Zapatistas or something. And I said, well, that's not very nice. And I said, why do you say that? And I didn't realize who this person was. It's one of these sort of people you're describing. Yeah. And I said, well, what do you have against us? We just believe in freedom. We think all transactions should be voluntary. How can you be against that? Yeah. And the person said, well, you believe in capitalism and, you guys just want to get rich. And I was like, well, I want everyone to have the ability to get wealthy. Yes, that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see this world, that be a possibility, unlike the way it is today. And we got into an argument about property rights, and we brought up a point about rape, and just said, well, you own your own body, because this person was saying there's no property rights, and I said, what would happen if you got raped? And this person jumped all over it and said, oh, now you're going to fantasize about rape? I was like, I just stopped talking to them at that point.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah, that was a person that contacted me actually, and they sent me a bunch of screenshots, and I'm looking at it, I'm defending you. I'm thinking like, well, yeah, your body is your property. And yeah, I mean, it is your moral obligation not to rape somebody. I mean, it seems pretty simple. But,
that person started off the conversation by saying they hope I get killed. So it kind of goes to show you these people are, most communists, in fact, they're I think they're insane. They might even be from a different planet or something. Yeah. They hate humanity so much. They want to see everything destroyed. It's really a twisted, weird, sick thing. And
I mean, I recently spoke with one of the members of the Communist Party here in Canada, and he the other day on Facebook was telling us that Stalin was a great man who never hurt any hurt any good people. And I'm just thinking, like, so 50 million people are all just terrible, or they deserve to die. It's just the logic of these people is amazing. And I just want to say for the WAM Show viewers that I met Jeff Berwick in Vancouver, and you know what? All these stereotypes of people from the communist left throw at him, totally unfair. The guy is a super nice guy, and I just want to throw that out there. Now, you mentioned the creature from Jekyll Island, and we got the chance to speak with J. Edward Griffin last week on the show, and the guy's brilliant. And with that, something else that comes from this creature from Jekyll Island that's become an international sort of conspiracy is what's happening at COP21. What on earth is going on there? I mean, they're trying to regulate the air we breathe, and they're trying to depopulate us. And what is your take on COP21 in Paris?
Let's just start with the whole global warming hoax. Which I tore that apart years ago, back when most people didn't even know about it. And I got a lot of flack for that. You've seen all the flack I take. That's part of the reason I smoke so much. You got to just relax a little bit when you're just getting constantly death threats and people hating you for telling the truth. But I forget who it was who said, in times of the universal deceit, it's a revolutionary act to tell the truth. And so it's bizarre to me that telling the truth is creates so much hate, but I'm not going to stop doing it. And so back back in when Al Gore came out with his stupid schlock documentary and his hockey stick chart, which was a total lie and proven to be a lie and proven they knew it was a lie. I looked into it and I said, well, this is crazy. So humans have somehow, in the last, it's really only been about 100 years since we've really industrialized. We've already destroyed this entire planet, just everything about it, just by the amount of carbon we're creating. I looked into the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, and it's almost like nothing. And even the amount of human-made carbon is almost nothing. If a volcano explodes, it puts more carbon in the air than I think all of humanity ever has, from what I can tell. I'm no expert on it, but I could tell what it was and who was promoting it, Al Gore. And what was he promoting? That we had to pay tax. Everyone in the world had to pay tax to the elites again, because we're creating carbon. So I pretty much saw that. But what it's really morphed into, and what the real people, the real controllers, the people behind the governments and the central banks, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and people like that, they have a depopulation agenda, and that's what a lot of this stuff is about. They're sort of like that person who messaged you. They hate people. They want them all to die. They think, except for themselves, of course. And it's essentially a lot of depopulation sort of agenda. They want more control. They want to create a one world government. They want to have control over everybody, every single transaction. That's why they're trying to move towards a cashless society now. So if people like me try to use a credit card somewhere, it'll just get turned off. Thank God for Bitcoin. If people actually understood what's going on, it's insane. It's absolutely insane what these people are trying to do.
You mentioned the Rothschilds, and I think it's worth pointing out that David Rothschild is one of the lead writers in this whole anthropogenic global warming hoax when it comes to his children's books on, the polar bears that are, floating on ice sheets and all that kind of crap. And I mean, also, like, people that are directly involved in things like this are people like Bill Gates, who said on video that he wants to depopulate the world by 60%. This is a guy that's heavily invested in vaccines. He's heavily invested in GMO foods in Africa. 48,000 children in India were paralyzed by his vaccines.
Yeah,
and
not a tear shed by Bill Gates.
Yeah, no. But
if I paralyzed 48,000 people, I'm not sure I could really live with myself. Has he ever even commented on it or shown any sort of sadness? I'm sorry to those 48,000 people who can't walk anymore for taking my BS vaccine that just puts a ton of mercury into their system and generally destroys their immune systems.
Well, and you proposed a question, has he ever, commented on it? And I know We Are Change confronted him about a year and a half ago, and they asked him about it, and, he just pushes the question off and starts talking about how great his father, the eugenicist was. And, he just pushes it off to the side, and he doesn't answer it. And honestly, I'd put a gun in my mouth if I paralyzed 48,000 people. But that's another story. Now, Mr. Sneisen, I wanted to propose this question before I brought it to Jeff here. Now, raising the minimum wage in Seattle and elsewhere, this is so insane because these people that propose, they say they stand for the workers. These workers are being laid off in mass because they want to raise the minimum wage, and these businesses are forced to outsource jobs and lay people off because, of course, they need to meet their profit margins, and they can't do that with raising a minimum wage from like $8 to $15. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a bunch of bullshit, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to force the small and medium-sized businesses out of business because they want the big conglomerate corporations, the corporate fascism to rule. So that's why a great way for them to force the smaller businesses, which have a very tight bottom line, out of business. It's fantastic for them. So, and of course, now people, become dependent on the government when they get fired out of their jobs. So it's a great scheme.
It is a great scheme, and it works perfectly into people's hands because not all liberals are bad people. They have good intentions, but they know not what they do, as many have mentioned before. And Jeff, what do you think about this whole push to raise minimum wage? I know you're safely living out in Acapulco, but what are your thoughts on this?
Well, as an anarchist, of course, I don't think there should be any government to start with, and definitely not a government that tells people what they should charge for the price of labor. It's insane. It's also immoral to use violence. That's what the government is saying if you, for example, if you knew someone, for example, said, "Hey, Josh, I want you to wash my car. Are you interested in that? I'll pay you $5." And if you go, "Hey, you know what? I'm not doing anything right now. 20 minutes, $5. Why not?" The government would actually come in and put me into a cage for doing that. So it just makes it much more harder to work. And the more you raise the minimum wage, this is basic economics. And this is one of the things that most people don't understand today. It's another thing never taught in school. For that reason, they don't want people to understand economics. And now they're even putting in Common Core math, so people don't even know how to add or subtract correctly. It's insane, but they're essentially making it very hard for people to find work. It's very anti-worker, and I hate that word worker to begin with. These communist sort of people, these Marxists, seem to think that there's a difference between a capitalist and a worker, and I guess they would call me a capitalist because I've got a few businesses, but I work harder than pretty much anyone I know. I call myself a worker, and if I stop working, I don't make as much money, and then that's how it goes. But just ask anyone who wants to raise minimum wage, and in Seattle there, I think they rose it to $15 or something like that. Just tell them, "Oh, so you think it's a good idea to raise it to 15?" They'll say yes. Then say, "Well, why not 150? That'd be 10 times better, wouldn't it?" And they go, "Well, no one would hire anyone." It's like, there you go. And they
have no concept of inflation. They have no concept of the fact that you raise it to $15 just like that, and you're pushing people out of work, and you're making it almost impossible for any real production to happen. And it just blows my mind that people think that it's a great idea to force businesses to raise that wage, and we see that.
Sounds good, right? That's the thing, and a lot of these things sound good. That's what you're pointing out earlier. And a lot of these, a fair amount of people who call themselves liberals aren't really terrible people usually. In fact, a lot of them seem to think or want for a lot of people to be doing a lot better. They really worry about the poor, and they worry about people who aren't making very much, can barely survive. And that's great, and I do too, but they have the wrong solution. They have the exact wrong solution. These things cause poverty. And in fact, central banks are one of the biggest reasons for it with the inflation. And then the government comes in with all its regulations, and it destroys the economy even further. These people just have no clue about economics, and they're trying to control the economy. It's absolute insanity.
And we see the most job loss in years in Seattle right now. And, people like Adam Kokesh, who's a voluntarist, and he went out a few years ago and tried to start a lemonade stand where he gave away lemonade for 5 cents. And the police body slammed them. They arrested them. They threw him in prison. What, for selling lemonade?
Lemonade is dangerous these days.
Oh, I know.
That happened to even Jerry Seinfeld last year. So it just goes to show that even people like Jerry Seinfeld, he was in the Hamptons in New York, and he just, with his kids, did a charity lemonade stand, and the cops came over and threatened them with arrest and told him to shut it down. Goes to show. And then John Stossel of Fox, actually, a couple of years ago, decided to go through all the government red tape to start up a lemonade stand. It took months to get all of the permits and regulations, and he estimated the total cost, if he would have went through it all, was $40,000. That's what these things do. They destroy the economy. They make it impossible for people to start. And as your guest there pointed out, that actually helps out these large, big, giant corporations because it raises the bar. So if you want to compete with Walmart, forget about it unless you got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars just to get the lawyers and accountants and tax teams together just to be able to figure it out. And that's what they want. So it's actually a form of fascism. And then we have it mixed with this massive socialism that we have today of the government taking a lot of money and spreading the wealth, which actually destroys the wealth. It's the worst of both worlds. Yeah, it's the worst of both worlds. The U.S. I call it a fascio-communist police state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is the height of insanity right now, where you have to $40,000. That's
doesn't make sense.
Where is the freedom to act as sovereign individuals and do as we please?
No, it's for your safety, though. It's for your safety, Josh. What if that little girl didn't properly wash those lemons properly? And it's by paying the government for a permit to sell lemonade. Of course, all of a sudden she'll wash it properly. And what about those fat bureaucrat losers who can't get a job in the private sector? What if they weren't paid $100,000 a year to go around and check the lemonade stands? You might get sick, Josh. And then what would you do?
My I guess my responsibility means nothing. It's like we're too stupid to take care of ourselves, and these communists are keeping this monopolization alive and well. The monopolies that these guys attack and say these damn capitalists. They're allowing these monopolies to exist in the first place by creating this red tape and regulation. And actually, I wanted to move on here to a lot of people who say they're against statism are supporting Donald Trump. And I understand to an extent, he does say a lot of politically incorrect things that are true, but he also says rather fascist things like monitoring the internet, the registries, the, banning an entire race of people, or not a race, a religion, I should say. It fits perfectly into statism. And what do you think about Donald Trump and this horrendous woman that he's running against? What's her name? Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary, yeah.
Well, obviously, as an anarchist, I think there shouldn't be any government. There shouldn't be any presidents. I don't need a leader. Yep. They're actually misleaders. As far as Trump goes, it has been interesting to see in the so-called anarchist community a number of anarchists actually supporting Trump. That just shows that they're not anarchists at all. Yeah. But they do have some. Like, I understand as well as you why they feel that way, and a lot of them, especially, are saying things like, I've seen some anarchists in Sweden, for example, who have said that, we have to keep them out because we have such a big welfare state that it'll bankrupt the country. And they're right. That's absolutely right. So get rid of the welfare state. And so what if it bankrupts the country? Good. Countries are evil. There's only mankind's two biggest enemies are governments and central banks. So true anarchists it's interesting though. It goes to show how strong you are about your beliefs when times are troubled. And there is troublesome times ahead, and there's going to be much, much more. So we'll really see who truly believes in true voluntary and peace and transactions. Sorry, I got my chair. Sorry. My wife just came in and took the chihuahuas. Okay, we're safe again. All right. What was I talking about? Trump.
Well, I mean, with Donald Trump, I mean, a lot of people will constantly push like the idea of, well, he's the lesser of the evils. He's the lesser of the evils. How well did that work with Obama? How well did that work with Bush before him, and Clinton and Bush? And it goes on and on and on. Lesser of the evils. And I mean, you ran for office. I know you're an anarchist, but you ran for office here in Canada. And I mean, what was your reason for running for office as an anarchist? A lot of viewers wonder about it, and I got asked.
Yeah, no, I received a lot of flack for that. First, to go back about choosing the lesser of two evils. When you choose the lesser of two evils, you're still choosing evil. You should be aware of that. We do live in a world today with politics, with governments, and they have a lot of really detrimental effects on all of our lives. And so I do understand the desire to try to change that system. Now, when I announced last year that I was going to run for the Libertarian Party of Canada, I said quite upfront, my whole intention was, just because I'm a fairly big name in Canada with what I've done there in the past and things like that I was trying to essentially do it to get a lot of publicity for libertarianism and the Libertarian Party of Canada, which were almost all anarchists, by the way, anarcho-capitalists, Tim Moen and so many others. So the goal was, because they provide a soapbox, essentially, politics. And for whatever reason, people are so brainwashed and they've lived in this brainwashed state by government and the mass media for so long. They give a lot of credibility to what a politician says, which is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. But they do. So even my own mom, she didn't actually know I was running. I told her. And she said, who are you running for? And I said, the Libertarian Party of Canada, and she'd never heard of it. So that was my point, was I was trying to just make some waves to try to get people to even know there's a Libertarian Party of Canada. And that, who knows, maybe from there they look into libertarianism and, this is interesting. We don't need to have slave masters and taxes and regulations and central banks. We don't need to be pulled over all the time on the street and have our houses broken into for plants and our dogs killed by communist-style centrally planned policing. We don't need all this. So that was essentially my goal. And I actually never ended up running, by the way. When it came time to actually sign, I couldn't go through with it. It made me sick. But I did try to get a lot of publicity for it, and that was my essential goal. But again, anarchists who say they support Trump, the reasoning I've heard for it doesn't sound very anarchist to me. So we're really finding out who is a true, real, voluntary, peaceful anarchist or not. And few of them have really outed themselves on this one. Now, some people say they support, for example, Ron Paul. That's a good example. When anarchists said they supported Ron Paul, I understood that one, because Ron Paul was he was essentially an anarchist. Almost everything he said was anarchist. So I could understand that. Hey, let's get an anarchist as a president. That'd be great. Maybe he'd just shut the door and close it down. That'd be awesome. So I understand that, but I don't think we're ever going to get a solution through the political process. But I understand getting involved in it. It makes some sense. But the reasoning I've heard for some people supporting Trump doesn't sound like they're very anarchist. Sounds like they're mostly racist and xenophobic is what they sound like.
Yeah, and that might be somewhat of a stereotype in some ways that people won't like, but I would actually have to agree, because looking back at Donald Trump in the 80s, from the rumors around the Trump Tower, he didn't even allow black people on the same floor as him. But I would have to pass it on to you, Mr. Sneisen. What do you think about Donald Trump? I mean, I know you've seen him speak before. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, it comes down to, we had a good talk with Jedrick Griffin last weekend, and I think I totally agree with him, where he said it's fun to watch him destroy today's media, and just like really making them uncomfortable and destroying their game that they've been playing on political correctness all the time. And that's what I love about Trump. Personally, I don't like a lot of the stuff that Trump says, that we have to shut down the internet, like different things that just comes out of his mouth that I 100% disagree with.
Well, it's the kind of fascism you'd expect from some of these communists that come full circle into fascism, where they want the regulation to the point of, we don't want freedom. We want just complete control. We want to be controlled. We're little, diseased ants, and we don't deserve, to be able to have our own free will. And that's, seemingly the same kind of crowd.
Just go to China, what they're doing right now with the Sesame credit. It sounds like Sesame Town, and sounds like fun, and it's a game actually, almost, where you get a score on how much the government, you talk government propaganda or not, and if you're against the government, this is a great implementation that we have our Facebooks and everything, and that's what they easily can implement for us here in the Western world.
Yeah. Well, now, Jeff, I have to ask, because this is going on right now. What are your thoughts on what's going on in Oregon? I mean, it seems pretty intense with the Bureau of Land Management there. Basically, once again, infringing on people's property rights. What are your thoughts on the armed kind of revolt, so to say?
Well, I've always said that I don't think an armed revolt is the way to get rid of these governments today, especially in the U.S. They're so overpowered. Back in the days of Washington and Jefferson and people like that, they put in the Second Amendment, very rightfully so, and said, funnily enough, they said about every 15 years you have to get into a bloody battle to kill the beast of government because it'll get so out of control. And they were right. But after a certain amount of time, people stopped doing that, and we're now a few hundred years in, and now this thing has nuclear bombs, drones, NSA listening to everything you say. You're not going to win through violent action that way. And I don't think that's the way to do it anyway. The way to do it is to enlighten people, to get out information to them that they don't need this beast, this horrible thing that killed over 200 or 400 million people in the 20th century, government and wars. You don't need that, and it's actually one of mankind's biggest enemies. So as far as the what's going on in Oregon, there definitely is a lot. The U.S. is becoming much more oppressive every day, it seems like, and there is a fair amount of Americans who still believe, and in general, I support what they believe in, that they want freedom, and but they think that they're going to have to take it back through violence. I think it's not going to work out well for them. And you can even see on Twitter, for example, the amount of brainwashed Americans who want these guys who just say, hey, we want to control our own land. We don't want the federal government in Washington, D.C. to be telling us what to do. People were calling for them to be shot. Who was it? Montel Williams wanted them to be beheaded, I believe. So the amount of brainwashing and mass media propaganda in the U.S. has gotten to the point now where there's literally tens or hundreds of millions of Americans who think that these people in Oregon are terrorists and should be shot for even just wanting to control their own land. So it's they're not going to have a ton of support, and if they do decide to go to a bloody revolutionary battle, I'll be cheering for them over the federal government. But I don't think they're going to win, and I don't think that's the way to go. But there's going to be a lot more things like that. This is just the beginning, and the federal government's going to continue to get more oppressive. And people are going to continue to stand up to it. Some people, and this is headed towards a very dangerous sort of situation, and rightfully so. I think at some point you have to stand up to oppression, and it should have been done decades ago, if not centuries. But at some point you do. But I don't think violence is the way.
It's terrifying times, but I'm trying my best to be optimistic. And I just wanted to ask you a bit about Anarchapulco, because I know it's going on from February 19th to 21st, 2016, and something I've been wanting to go to for quite a few years. Can't quite scratch the dollars together to do it, but I wish you all a lot of luck. Can you tell our viewers a bit about what's going on here this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called Anarchapulco. It's the world's largest anarcho-capitalist conference. We've got amazing speakers: Larkin Rose, Adam Kokesh, Walter Block. So many. I could go on, and it's right here on the beach in Acapulco, Mexico, which is nice. We're also going to have a number of sort of workshops and conferences around the conference itself, including, you brought up We Are Change earlier. Luke Rudowski will be doing his We Are Change Media University, which is a one-day sort of workshop on how to become like yourself, Josh. And I'm sure you know, and that it's not easy, and it takes a lot of learning, and so that's a good way to sort of get tips from some of the big people who have been doing this stuff, including Luke Rudowski and Dan Dix of Press for Truth, who I know you also know. And so for this is where revolution actually can be, is in the media and information. And we need more people like yourself, Josh. And I really like your work, by the way, a big fan. That get this information out there. That's how we can change the world. And isn't it beautiful? We can change the world just through our own minds. We don't have to get into these bloody battles anymore just to have some freedom. So at the Change Media University last year, he had about 50 people who came and learned how to produce their own podcasts, how to become their own media organization, things like that. And we also have a number of other events around that are similar to that. We have a peaceful parenting and unschooling workshop, number of different things. So it's really a number of things all in one, all around voluntarism, peaceful ways of living, also capitalism. And capitalism, by that I mean just creating, providing value to others, which is what that really is. And that's how you earn money, is by providing value to others. So we have hundreds of literally capitalists coming who are starting up all kinds of new ventures. A lot of them are actually helping to surpass the nation state by creating these applications, including a number of anti-police state applications that could actually end up with removing public policing, because people will actually take charge of policing on their own, all through applications on their phone. So all kinds of things like that. It's really a great event, interesting, fun, all on the beach in Acapulco, Mexico.
And I always have to tell people it's a great time to be in independent media. I mean, quite a few years ago, I was watching the work that Jeff Berwick did, the work that We Are Change has done, Press for Truth, InfoWars, etc. And then, it's really as easy as being the change you wish to see. And I know that's a cliche saying at this point, but you just go out there and you do the best you can. Even if you don't have a lot of free time, use that little bit of free time to do something. And it's amazing what you can accomplish. I mean, you'll get Jeff Berwick saying that he's a fan. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, Jeff, and we hope to have you on again. You're always a very interesting person to listen to, and someone who has been the change you wish to see. So I thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Josh. Peace.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Obviously that was a great interview with Jeff Berwick. We really enjoy having him on the show, and our next guest is also extremely interesting. We have a way of getting very interesting people on the show. Debbie Bacigalupi is a businesswoman and biotech consultant who's running for Congress as a Republican in California's newly drawn 14th district against Jackie Speer, who some may know as being one of the people shot at Jonestown alongside Representative Leo Ryan in 1978. The riding is 80% Democrat according to voting records. However, and this is the important part, Debbie is known for taking a challenge and coming out on the right end of it. So she's a champion for property rights, farmers, and environmental issues. So welcome to the WAM Show, Debbie.
Thank you for having me. I'm not running for Congress right now. That was actually from 2012. That bio, but what a blast to run for something like that. Talk about having to be fearless, especially in the Bay Area where I had death threats against me. So it was a fascinating ride, and I would recommend it to anyone and everyone, even you in Canada.
Well, and I should have made that more clear that you were running. But I mean, I think it's so brave that someone would run as a Republican in an 80% Democratic riding. I mean, that's crazy. So what were the death threats? Like you mentioned, you had death threats. What were people saying to you?
Yeah, no, I would get Facebook messages saying you should die, and some of them were from self-described Marxists. On my signage, I had signage all over the Bay Area. In fact, you would not see any signage of Jackie Speer, the woman I ran against. She's a career politician. She doesn't even have to show up to anything, and she gets elected. I heard one time that, some of these career politicians can die, and we don't want that, but they can die, and they will still get elected because people recognize their names because that's all they've seen for years. But on my signage, so my signage got stolen. I had people using razor blades, slashing my picture, like huge signs too, slashing my name out. But most of it was like email threats or a Facebook threat, but enough to say, whoa.
Well, there's so many people that just the second they hear Republicans, it's been indoctrinated into their brain that you must be pro-war, you must, be someone that only, like hates poor people or something. When really, in reality, the free market actually helps. Yeah, and it's so much like a Marxist to preach peace with a knife. And I've said this before because I've seen it with people who represent the United Nations as well. People have threatened my life.
Yeah.
A woman took out a jackknife on me one time for asking her why she was carrying a United Nations flag. And it's like, oh yeah, you're preaching peace. Right. But I wanted to ask you, Debbie, after many years, Agenda 21, the United Nations Depopulation and Environmental Agenda is being revamped. Now, can you explain to our viewers who may not know what Agenda 21 is, your involvement in its opposition, and the new Agenda 2030?
Right. Well, Agenda 21 was to be the blueprint for the 21st century. Where are we, the 21st century? And it was based on the premise given to us by the Club of Rome back in the 1970s, and based on population and what they were really starting to spread, whether it was global warming or global cooling, but they decided to lump it into something called climate change. So the Club of Rome back in the 70s, on a book that they announced to the world called Limits to Growth, said that by the early 21st century, based on the overconsumption and the overpopulation of human beings and how much we extract resources from the earth simply to live life, that because of climate change, human beings would destroy themselves. In fact, there were supposed to be, according to them, already catastrophic deaths by the early 21st century. So, hello, that did not happen. But anyway, so next in 1992, they took it further. And just prior to 1992, Maurice Strong, who was the United Nations Secretary to the United Nations Environment Program, tasked a woman named Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was the first female prime minister of Norway. And she, John, and she wrote this document for the United Nations called Our Common Future. And in Our Common Future, they defined what sustainable development was. Sustainable development is the agenda for the 21st century. It is Agenda 21. And sustainable development was promulgated at the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. So what is Agenda 21? What is the agenda for the 21st century? Everything must be based on sustainable development. What's sustainable development? It's social equity, environmental justice, and economic justice. Another way to put it is major overhaul of the human society via social engineering, wealth redistribution, and change behavior. So fast forward to later on 1992, George Herbert Walker Bush soft-lawed Agenda 21 into the United States. President Clinton, through an executive order 12852, then created an executive order for the President's Council on Sustainable Development. George Bush did not stop it. And President Obama sounds like wants to be the UN Secretary General. And he has been pushing climate change and climate change legislation and executive orders and climate change plans and clean power plans, which Canada is all behind, especially with Trudeau. So in other words, it is controlling, monitoring, and surveilling all human activity in the guise or in the spirit of saving a dying planet from human beings. Does that make sense?
No, and you mentioned Obama wanting to be the Secretary General, and that just sent shivers down my spine. It's funny though, because like we were just talking with Jeff Berwick before this on the show about how like people like David Rothschild writing children's books about like the global warming or anthropogenic global warming hoax, and saying, you know, we need to depopulate. We have people like Bill Gates who wants to depopulate the world by 60%, getting involved with vaccines and Monsanto. We got fluoride in our water here in Winnipeg, and we've got, the trails in the sky. We've got war. It's all coming together exactly as like this whole plan was, and kind of mimics the Communist Manifesto. And you mentioned Maurice Strong. Now, Maurice Strong came from Manitoba, where I am right now. And, I didn't shed a tear when I found out he passed away. I'll tell you that much. But, and you also mentioned Norway. And, John, can you tell us a bit about what's going on in Norway?
Yeah, isn't that funny? The two of you sitting there, you represent. Yeah. You're representing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's very funny with Norway. Norway was in 1991, we were the first country in the world to implement carbon taxes. Since then, you're supposed to lower your CO2 emissions. Norway's CO2 emissions have gone up about 28%. So clearly carbon taxes doesn't work. That they claim that if you implement it, it would definitely work. It's just another power grab and taking more of your money and giving to your government friends. Norway also is very known, especially Oslo, the capital. They're really trying to shut down traffic in and around Oslo, the capital. Actually, the Green Party of Norway was suggesting just recently in their recent run for government that we should shut down the main artery, the E6, which is the highway that goes through Oslo, and they want to shut it down because they don't want any car traffic, and they don't care about the people, like the thousands upon thousands of people that commute and need a car for their job. They say, well, just take the bus or take the train. You don't have to have a car.
Or you could walk.
Yeah. So, like Norway, looking at Norway, and especially when you explained Agenda 21 to me at Freedom Force International Convention, it was just like bling bling, like lights came on. It's like, wow, we had this for a very long time in Norway.
Yeah.
And as you said, like Norway was like the former Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland was the one that wrote the draft, and she's from the Workers' Party, which is very leaning, hardcore leftist party in Norway as well. So yeah.
And I'd like to ask, what is the difference between Agenda 21 and 2030? Because I know they've given this new name and they're trying to revamp this whole thing.
Well, there's not much difference in the two, except for Agenda 21 is the blueprint for the 21st century. When I was at the Rio Earth Summit in 2012, somebody's at my door. Hopefully it's not the UN. But when I was at the Rio Earth Summit in 2012, pardon me while you guys join me to grab the door here. Maurice Strong had a button. He was alive back then. And he had a button. Oh, Sorry, Choco, I just slammed the door on my dog. He had a button that said "Step Up Agenda 21." You know, while I was gonna move anyway because I wanted to grab a children's book. Come on, Choco. Anyway, my dog will run out the door and be down the street in a second here. Welcome to live radio, live Skype. So he had a button and it said "Step Up Agenda 21," which is Agenda 2030. Their ultimate goal was by the year 2050, they would have Agenda 21 completed. But I think because people like you and I are catching on, we're spreading the word. There's lots of alternative media that's talking about this subject right now, and whether it's blogs or YouTube videos or whatever, or shows like this. So I think they kind of started getting scared and said we need to step it up. Here's a goal for Agenda 2030. In fact, this is a 2020, and this goes right to what John was saying about cars. By the year 2020, they want to have cut in half the number of traffic accidents, fatalities, car accidents. How are you going to do that in 4 years? So what you have to think about, like, what radical things are they going to do to our lives where they can accomplish by the year 2020 to have the number of traffic accidents? I don't know about you, but I can only think of 2 ways. Well, a couple ways, more than 2. One, well, they all have to get either reducing the number of people on planet Earth or reducing the number of people in cars. I don't know how else you do that. You force them into to walk, bike, or take public transportation. You legislate them, you nudge them, you make driving so expensive or gas so expensive, or and for the average person, they might not be able to afford to drive a car. Another goal is by the year 2030 to have everyone as lifelong learners. This is only 2030. I can't do Common Core math, so whatever that is, yeah. And to have all adult learners and children on a sustainable development education where you and I and everyone else is now marching for sustainable development. In other words, we become kind of their government propaganda to push their goal of sustainable development in every inch of our lives. Another one is to eradicate poverty through policy. How do you eradicate poverty first and through and every aspect, they say, of poverty through policy?
Yeah, I mean, it's insanity, the idea that government can fix poverty by regulating more, because in the end, they're only causing it to be harder for businesses to hire employees and make profit in order to hire more employees and pay people more.
Right.
And, of course, it's nonsense.
Agenda 2030 is just a stepping stone. It's just a goal to accomplish, the overall Agenda 21. And I would be remiss to not mention a book, and John got one. It's called Technocracy Rising. And you can find it on technocracy.news. In fact, I'm flying out tonight in just a bit to go spend some time with my friend Patrick Wood and strategize on how we can get more education out to the world about technocracy, how it really is the ultimate plan. It's the ultimate plan on controlling all human activity through technology. So you think about the GPS that we have, your smartphones. Right now, I heard somebody say the other day, and I just love this, you guys, that right now I'm using my smartphone and my head's bowing down, that we, as we use our smartphones and technology, are bowing down to the God of technology. We can't live without our smartphones now. We can't get, we need them we need them for everything. So, it really is, we're living in an era where, you just can't survive without, and there are a lot of people who can survive right now, my parents, for example, without modern technology. But we are way moving away from that, where we are going to depend on the government to have the lights on, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And sorry to interrupt. And then also the cashless society that the bankers are promoting right now. They want to take that last piece of money that we can have to control them and to force them into submission. They want to take that away from us so they can have full control over every single transaction that we make, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And that's, the new green economy, in my opinion, is where they move us into like a cap and trade system based on the natural resources around us. They refer to them as natural resource units, but where you will not need cash, you'll have credits. And you'll be either a good global citizen, you'll be saving your credits, or you'll be a bad one and polluting and using them, irresponsibly, like possibly getting cheese from Switzerland when really you should just be getting cheese from your local area. If we are even allowed to get dairy products, because cattle are a big no-no to the United Nations.
We're getting so close to the FEMA camps, it's getting a little worrying to me. And I think it's just insane that this is literally adding up from all aspects of life, from health and wellness to the control of our money, to make us debt slaves, to war, to, just all these people that have really good intentions, but they're fooled by these people into giving away their freedom to the government,
Yeah.
and giving away their ability to choose. And the markets are just getting destroyed, just totally obliterated. And something else that I wanted to mention was you're known to stand up for property rights. What do you think of the armed protest in Oregon and the Bureau of Land Management?
The federal government has defined unlimited power. The power comes from the people. They have overstepped their authority. They are not to own land, period. They are to own the 100 square miles or whatever it is. Don't quote me on that. Again, I'm not a Common Core math person yet. So, but
Yeah.
The 10 square miles or whatever it ends up being in Washington, D.C. That is the only land they are supposed to own. Everything else that they have their hands on, they are just supposed to manage for the people, so that the people, the states, can use the property and the resources and extract and have their own sovereignty and their own economies, and not rely on the federal government for anything except for what its limited powers were, which one is international commerce. Another was for security. And so beyond that, there's one more, and I can't remember it right now, but it's just those three. It's three things. It's not for healthcare. It's not to give us, permits to have guns. We have our Second Amendment rights. We don't need the federal government to say you can or cannot have guns. We have the supreme law of the land, which is the U.S. Constitution. So, other than that, our federal government is supposed to, not have the power that it does. And that's why we in the United States have the three branches of government, to keep the power in check, so that they can be a check and balance system. So anyway, the Hammond case, as a rancher, I don't know if you mentioned in there that I'm a 6th generation cattle rancher. So our heart goes out to the Hammond family. They did the right thing. They were sentenced. If the judge made a mistake, that is too bad. There is no double jeopardy here in the United States. And what it turns out is the Oregon State General Attorney, who had little to no experience, came forward. She was an Obama appointee, and she came forward and said, I don't think that the Hammonds served long enough. So it went back to court. And so now these Hammonds are serving their 5 years. And yet the BLM is responsible for setting backfires that explode 800,000 acres here and there. They destroy ecosystems. Well, we're not taking care of our forests like we used to. Our Department of Interior is not allowing, based on endangered species like the spotted owl, for example, for us to manage, to keep our forests where our forests are less dense. Deer don't want to live in the shade. They don't want to eat pine needles. So why are they coming out of the forest? Because the forests don't have enough sun coming in, because we're not managing our forest. And what happens in that case is we've got an extraordinary fuel load. So when there is a forest fire, our fires are burning hotter, longer, and deeper, and destroying ecosystems. But
and isn't it interesting, though, because this plays into Agenda 21, isn't it interesting that the government claims that they care more, seemingly is claiming that they care more about, some diseased crop than humanity itself when they're, blowing up entire neighborhoods
Yeah.
overseas. And that's okay, but you burn some crop that's diseased and no, you're an arsonist. And then
Well,
on top of
yeah.
that, playing directly into that as well is the fact that Obama is okay with arming Mexican drug cartels. He's okay with arming ISIS. He's okay with arming Al Qaeda. But, U.S. citizens who are obviously scared for good reason can't carry guns.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
that's the push.
it is, and you're not only an arsonist, you're also now a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, because you've destroyed public lands. Well, those public lands are owned by us, not by the federal government. I was going to say one more thing about that. As a cattle rancher, we love our land. Why would we want to destroy our own property? We live on that land. We love that land. We survive. It's our livability. So why would we destroy our own property? And you know what? The other thing is, Indians used to do it all the time. But it's okay if the Indians and if the Department of Interior do it. But if you, a cattle rancher, and I think with the introduction, not reintroduction, the introduction of Canadian gray wolves into the United States from the north, and the introduction of Mexican gray wolves from the south, those animals, those endangered species that are collared with a GPS system. They have their little government earrings. So they have a government necklace, they have government earrings, and they're being introduced into our rural landscapes. So there's that attack on the ranchers and the farmers. The environmentalists are coming up with whatever endangered species. There's to say that they have a right to come on our land and see what's on our land. And you have the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And then you have the United Nations blaming us for global warming and climate change as cattle ranchers. And so, I think that there's just this major attack on ranchers, that we are, land barons and we're rich. I can tell you we're not rich. We may have some land, but we are, money poor. They say land rich, money poor. But how rich is land when there are regulations that are, a mile high, that you can't even use your own property the way is best, because you're probably breaking a new law at any second now, and you can go to jail and be fined $100,000, like in the case of these wolves that are now showing up on my parents' ranch. So the attack on us ranchers and farmers is not fair. I'm wearing leather right now, but beyond this leather jacket, the insulation in your home, the sheetrock that was used to build, whatever building you are as a listener. If you're going to ride your bike today, your tire and the asphalt that you're riding your bike on, all are livestock byproduct. The plastic that goes into, somebody's heart valve to keep them alive is not only livestock, but petroleum. So if we're going to start attacking and all the byproducts that come from petroleum are extraordinary. So we're talking millions of byproducts that you and I are using right now and every day, including our cell phones and our computers, that are being attacked under this new agenda. And I think I think when people realize the impact that this is going to have, introducing wolves, the attack on farmers and ranchers, I think all people, are going to be in shock very soon when their lifestyles must change, because things are either too expensive to get and they can't afford them, or they're just simply not available because we don't have, the byproduct producers, the ranchers, the farmers, to produce these things anymore.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is the height of first world enslavement, folks. I mean, what we're watching encroach on us right now is something that we've never seen before. It's been many years in the making, but I mean, this is property. This is individuals' right to their own land, which was one of the founding ideas in the U.S. Constitution. And we've also got to look at, I mean, years ago, I know Alex Jones had mentioned on his show that back in the 90s that, I mean, things like the Grand Canyon, that's not even U.S. land. I mean, it's the United Nations and UNESCO and these things that own our land, and they're selling it off to globalists across the world. And I mean, it's the height of, like I said, first world enslavement. And if you think it's going to stop here, you're wrong. It's going to continue going the exact way it's going right now. Yeah. And it won't end until we, the people, stand up and say, we want our health. We want our land. We want our rights. We're sovereign, free individuals, and the government doesn't tell us what to do. We tell the government what to do. So I'd like to thank you so much, Debbie, for the work you're doing. I definitely also want people to check out Patrick Wood. You've got incredible work out there as well. Is there any way that people can help you and check out what you're doing?
Well, you know what? They can go to your Facebook and send me a Facebook message and add me on Facebook, and support the Facebook messages that I do out there. I think the more support we get, and social media is an extraordinary tool. I know Patrick says that that what we've been seeing is 55% of the response on technocracy.news is coming from Facebook. So it's growing. It's extraordinary. So friend me on Facebook, and then support my Facebook posts. Don't say mean things, but just say, yeah, we're seeing it here in Canada. Because you know what? I have friends that I haven't reached yet either. They want to call us Chicken Little and those sorts of things. But you know what? Here's an example of a children's book. You mentioned children's books. This is fact. These United Nations books for children on global warming are out there, and so we need support in the social media world. And I just thank you guys. Have me on the show again. This has been a blast.
Absolutely.
And let's let's unite. Let's do a buy country alliance.
Absolutely. And free of, globalist nefarious entities trying to, control us. And you mentioned Chicken Little, and I'll just sign out of this by saying we were speaking with G. Edward Griffin last week on the show. And as G. Edward Griffin said, Chicken Little was right. The sky was falling. He just didn't know when it was going to happen. And I think that's the same for us. We don't know when it's going to happen. We know it's happening, though. Yeah. And we know that we need to do something to stop it. So thank you very much, Debbie, and we hope to talk with you soon.
Okay. Bye,
Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, we're back with John Sneisen here. And John, what did you think of the show today? What do you think we learned? What can we come out of this show saying, I didn't know about that, and it kind of clicked in our heads?
Well, I think Jeff Berwick had so much great insight to tell us. We know certain aspects of it, but just his point of view and where he brings everything into through his knowledge base and what he's learned over the years. Like, he's a great reader. He has time now to read and understand things. This is a place that everybody needs to get going, where if they're involved in some kind of movement or something, they have to get to a point where they can do it full time, so they can really engulf themselves into it and become true experts on the topic. So they could go out there and talk to people and learn things. That's I would say that's what I really learned from Jeff Berwick, is how he's been able to put that together.
And as Jeff Berwick kind of mentioned, he did learn the hard way. He just narrowly missed getting destroyed in the tech bubble in 2002 with his website StockHouse. But I mean, the point is, he's an extremely successful figure. He's made incredible money over the years, and he has done it in a non-nefarious way that we don't quite see anymore with big businessmen that are people like Jeff Berwick, who doesn't want anyone to control you. He wants you to be able to control your own self, and he wants you to be successful. There's always this kind of stereotype that rich people hate the poor, and always that kind of divide that's pushed by media. And it's just not the case. There are a lot of terrible rich people out there. There's also quite a few bad poor people out there that if you gave them the money, they'd probably do some pretty terrible things themselves. But people like Jeff Berwick should not be clumped into this kind of stereotype of just some arrogant rich guy who hates everybody who's poor. He wants you to be rich. He wants you to gain wealth. He wants you to have the freedom to more easily be able to gain wealth. And I think that's so important to point out.
Rich people are not I met a lot of richer individuals, but looking at it, and he said this great, it talks about work. That's what communism is talking about. Well, those people that have gained a lot of wealth in their life, we're not talking about the corporate fascists. We're talking about the real great entrepreneurs that are around, that are small and medium-sized businesses. And we were talking about how they're getting demolished and destroyed by things like minimum wage or legislation. Yeah. Those are the hard workers that really we should care more about. People that are gaining a little bit of wealth, they're quite wealthy individuals like Jeff Berwick. but they've actually worked their ass off to get there.
Absolutely.
Pardon my language, but
Yeah.
you know, like that's what they've done.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Berwick has worked incredibly hard for many years, and he was very young when he first found wealth. And of course, he's also learned a lot over the years since then. I know in the early days, he started off as a conservative, turned to more libertarianism, and then ended up as an anarchist. And then, of course, Debbie Bacigalupi is so insightful when it comes to things like Agenda 21, property rights. She really goes on a rant. You don't have to say much. She's got that information in her head.
Oh,
and
it's
she just goes.
amazing to watch that. I just loved how she, you know, like, especially how she was talking about her being a cattle rancher, because like she's with her family, they've been doing cattle ranching I think for 5 generations or whatever it was, and they really have seen the takeover of their land in eastern, sort of western United States. I looked at a map I actually posted on my page yesterday, and when you look at the western sides of the United States, it's basically like, I don't know the exact number, but it looks like almost 70-80% is government owned. How should the government own any land? Like, that should be like free to the people. If nobody really owns it, it should be us as individuals being free to use that land and be around there, you know, like go and fish or enjoy ourselves on that piece of property.
And she's the type of person that, you know, a lot of these Marxists or communists claim that they stand up for. And, you know, it's just so sad that she's given this stereotype because she ran as a Republican, that she must be some suit, that she must be some, you know, immoral, suit-wearing rich person. She's a farmer. She's a 6th-generation rancher. She's done everything in her power to try and get people to realize what's going on around them, to save them from the technocracy, from the collectivism. And, I mean, she's a real activist. So next time you see somebody who's running as a Democrat, as a Republican, etc., next time you see someone who follows any kind of political ideal, let's not judge them based off that instantly. Let's judge them on their humanity. Let's judge them on their actions as a human being. Their character, like Martin Luther King said, judge one not by the color of their skin, but by the character and their personality. And that goes further than just the skin color. That just goes towards you as an individual. What have you done? What can you do in your free time? Not everyone has time to do things, you know, for the entire world. That's a big, you know, task to take upon. But what have you done as an individual to make your environment better around you? Your friends or family? And I think that's a major message. Let's look at humanity. Let's not look at stereotypes. Let's not look at, you know, some preconceived notions that the media has fed us. And that's a point of us here at the WAM Show, is to point out people's humanity and what they've don. And we hope you join us next week. We've got some incredible guests coming on. I can't announce anything yet, but we've got, let's just say we've got some people from Hollywood that are interested in coming on the show. We've got very high up businessmen, investors, you know, stock traders. We've got politicians. We've got activists, and we've got so many interesting people that are wanting to come on the show. So please stay tuned next week for the WAM Show. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth. Be the change.